If there's one thing I'm glad about when it comes to Ninjago, it is when we get clarification on what is and what isn't canon to the show itself. The only exception to this rule, I guess, is Way of the Departed, but I feel like that is just worthy of its own video in of itself. But for the most part, we get to know what is and what isn't actually in the show's timeline. But some of these non-canon materials I honestly think are quite fascinating, and the reason why they're not canon I think is also quite interesting. So that is what I wanted to talk about today, the non-canon aspects of Ninjago itself. And if you enjoy this idea, let me know if you want more of it, because I've only selected a couple things from the two different categories that I have selected for this topic. So if you do want more of it, let me know, because there's certainly a lot more to talk about. The first category for the non-canon material that we actually get is actually additional media. It may be shorts, it may be small shows or episodes, it may be games, it may be comics, and I've selected 3 of possibly the most infamous ones that we have ever gotten throughout the show's history. The first one that I wanted to talk about that I do think is quite interesting is of course Shadow of Ronin, which I do think is the one that a lot of people talk about the most, and I do think is actually one of the ones that a lot of people do still consider canon. Now Shadow of Ronin is honestly worthy of a video in of itself, but I will reserve that for a later date because I do want to do a full retrospective on it. But this is possibly one of the most debated topics when it comes to non-canonicity, because a lot of people do consider Shadow of Ronin to be canon in a lot of ways. I think the problem with it is the fact that it just simply took too many liberties and took too many different details over to the extreme, which means by definition it simply cannot be canon. Now there are some parts of this game that have been loosely somewhat canonized to the actual show itself, but there is nothing that is completely original to this game that has been definitively canonized to the show. The main thing is actually the obsidian weapons, interestingly, because a lot of people actually do consider them to be canon in some way, it's just that they simply never appeared in the show. The other thing that people do think is canon to the show is actually the case of Ronin and the ninjas' interactions, because you actually get to hear in Season 5 Kai say to Ronin that he left them in the mouth of A, and then the sentence cuts off. So a lot of people have considered that to be the events of Shadow of Ronin. But at the same time, it doesn't really make much sense. I mean, for one, throughout that entire interaction with Ronin, Nia and Wu are with the ninja, so it doesn't really make much sense because Nia and Wu were also unaware of Ronin in Season 5, so that entire interaction just really couldn't have happened, and also at the same time, Kai's sentence of "you left us in the mouth of A" doesn't really make much sense if you think it's a dimensional space. The sentence just doesn't really make a lot of sense, so I don't really think it could be canon, but I understand why people do think it is. But I just think when it comes down to it, Shadows of Ronin, like I said, just took simply too many liberties, because those are just the simple examples that I gave. There are so many more that aren't even acknowledged here, such as the entire prologue of the ninja going in to steal Chen's staff physically couldn't have happened within Season 4. I mean, the ninja are in their tournament outfits, while they've still got Zane with them, which they never interacted in those outfits, and the whole thing of infiltrating in the Ninja DX just couldn't really have happened within this timeline, so there is that, and also all the other previous armies are active and fighting against the ninja in this case and doing different things when it simply also would never have happened. The Ninjoid army weren't out around post Season 3, the Serpentine were good by the point of Season 4, so there's no reason for them to be fighting the ninja, and I believe even the skeletons make an appearance at some point, so it just simply doesn't really make a lot of sense. The second piece of media I wanted to talk about for this video was actually another one of the games from around this time span, because in similar vein to Shadow of Ronin, this one definitely holds a special place in my heart, and that is Ninjago Tournament. Now it does feel kind of cheap to put this in a non-canon video because this simply could not have been canon in any way, shape or form, but I do think it's still worth noting because it's still an interesting one to actually take a look at. Of course, this one is also based around tournament of elements, and this one actually takes place within the tournament itself, and you get to select a character, and you go through progressing waves of different enemies. Now, like I said, it goes out saying this is non-canon because it just simply couldn't have taken place like it actually did, and honestly, the roster of characters also just make it completely impossible as well. There are so many playable characters in this game that just physically wouldn't have been able to have been within the tournament. Samukai is in there, Crunch is in there, the Stone Army's in there, the Serpentine are in there. They're all in there when it just doesn't really make a lot of sense if you wanted to consider it to be canon. The thing is though, is that it very easily could have been canon if they just made the roster a lot more friendly, and I know they weren't intending on it to be canon and they just wanted it to be a lot more fun and games, but at the same time, they could have made it as a this is what didn't really take place within the show if they just made the roster a bit more simple. Now I'm not saying take out all the fun characters, because this is actually one of the very few times we actually got Samukai in an actual Ninjago game. It's quite fun to note that if the roster was simply the ninja and also the elemental masters, you could have actually had a game that was canonically set within the tournament. But that doesn't take away from how fun it actually was, and like I said, the character roster was quite interesting. I mean, fun fact, a lot of these character models were just lifted from the Ninjago Ninjoids game, which is honestly quite interesting to note, but at the same time, they were there, there's no point in making new ones if you're making the exact same thing. But like I said, there are just a lot of fun little anomalies when it looks at the characters in the game itself, such as Lloyd being able to use Kai's obsidian sword if you upgrade him within the game, which is actually quite funny, because also the obsidian weapons just reappeared in this game as well, which is just interesting regardless. But apart from the Lloyd using Kai's sword thing, there are just a lot of other little interesting aspects, such as the pink version of Zane in this game actually being based on his DX form instead of his original Gi. But like I said, at the end of the day, I don't think this one was ever intended on being canon, so that makes it non-canon, and that's why I wanted to mention it. And also, I just wanted to talk about this really fun game. But let me move on to the last one in the category of media. And this one is going to be the Woo's Tea shorts, because honestly I do find these quite interesting, and these are definitely worthy of a standalone retrospective in of themselves as well, but I definitely just wanted to mention them here. This was just a fun little short series consisting of 20 episodes. It focuses on Woo's new tea shop by the name of Steeper Wisdom, and it also demonstrates a rivalry that they had with a coffee shop and a female robot that was just across the street, and all 20 of them revolve around different antics that goes along with that concept. The thing is that it literally cannot be canon because of, for one, it being confirmed by official sources, but the other thing is that it literally cannot be within the timeline where it states to be. There are two major aspects to these shorts that demonstrate that it cannot be where it claims to be within the timeline. The first one is that Cole is actually a human and he has his ghost scar, which means it has to take place after Day of the Departed. However, the ninja have their pre-movie designs and Woo is not lost in time, which means it has to take place before Hands of Time. But the problem is with that is that this special and the season actually take place near enough back to back with each other. So it's no way that the ninja were able to buy, renovate and start a business with Woo in the very short amount of time that it actually had. So it has to just simply be a timeline error. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that it is not within the timeline, because there are so many little details and so many little things that happen within the show that either feel extremely out of character or completely contradicted the timeline that we actually have at this point. The first detail that just simply seems off is the complete dynamic between Jay and Nia in some of the episodes. The one in particular is the one called Funny Guys, where it seems to be that their relationship just doesn't really feel existent at this point in the show as it is seemingly describing. However, this is just after Skybound, where they took their relationship a lot more seriously after that point in time. So honestly, this just feels like it completely contradicts all of Jay and Nia's character progression, so it makes me glad that it's not. But Jay just in general just seems very out of character within these shorts anyways, and I do think the best example of that is actually in the one called Remote Control Zane, where Jay is completely taking control of Zane's actions and is seemingly really enjoying doing it at the exact same time, which feels so contradictory to how Jay is as an actual character. So I actually kind of like the fact that this is no longer actually canon. And the final one that I do think was interesting is the case of Kai, because he also seemingly disapproves of the relationship between Jay and Nia within these shorts. And again, this really does feel contradictory to what we've had before now. Of course, in Skybound, for example, Kai refers to them kissing as gross, but that just shows that Kai just doesn't really want to see it. It doesn't really show an outright disapproval of their relationship, because he has never expressed that apart from these shorts. So it's good that these shorts don't exist within the canon timeline, because it would give a whole new layer of meaning to Kai's approval of the whole situation. But honestly, it does go to show that I'm really glad that Woo's Tea is not canon, because it has a lot of downsides to the idea of it could be in canon, and it doesn't really have a lot of upsides. It doesn't really have an overall benefit to the show itself. So I'm just glad that it sits in this really weird bubble, so I'm kind of glad that we can just push it off to the side. But like I said, said, that is for a later video. But on an overall, Wu's Tea is a fun little short series. I just think it had so many different issues that I'm glad we don't have to consider within Ninjago. But those are, in my opinion, the three from the first category I wanted to talk about. The second category I think is even more interesting, and that's the case of the actual physical LEGO sets and minifigures that we actually get. Now, there are a lot of examples of us getting sets or minifigures that are not canon to the show in any way, but honestly, I do actually like when we do get these for a lot of different reasons, but it's mainly just the minifigures. Of course, there are a lot of different Ninjago sets that we have gotten that aren't canon, but it's mainly just little vehicles and little tidbits that just don't really have much of a purpose. I mean, a lot of them just serve as a way to get certain minifigures. I mean, the most recent example is the new Kai motorbike, but it comes with his spectral suit, fully suited up with the armor and all, so it's just a good way of getting that minifigure in general. But I do think the minifigures is really where I home in on it. But the main thing for this video in terms of non-canon minifigures is, in my opinion, the case of Dragon's Rising J. Up until the reveal of him being Rogue, LEGO were actually still providing us with a full set of Ninja minifigures, including the J minifigures, which honestly has been really good for the collection, but at the same time, just a really funny what-if scenario. It is really interesting to me because we got non-canon but fully unique and molded minifigures for J Season 1, his mech, and his climber outfit, and it's really nice because someone who does display all of the Ninjago minifigures together, it is nice to not have gaps when it comes to my J's. But it is also shocking at the same time because this is the first time where they've really gone in and actually given us these non-canon minifigures for seemingly no exact reason, because before now we never really got any versions of non-canon missing Ninja in any way, shape or form. They went back every once in a while, such as with Tournament Zane, but at the same time there are still so many that they never actually did. I'm looking at you, Digi Zane. So honestly, it does lead to the question of why did they actually give us all of these J minifigures? And honestly, my best guess is that they probably just wanted to give us them because people would have asked for them, but I also think at the same time it was for people to wonder if J was actually going to return as a ninja this time round. But I can't lie, I am just simply happy that we did get them, but like I said earlier, it does lead me to wish that we did actually get to see these suits in the show itself, because the Season 1, like, hooded scarf that the ninja have around their shoulders, I really wish we got to see that with Jay, and I really wish we actually got to see the climber armor on Jay as well. I don't know why, it is just curiosity. But it doesn't accept the fact that this is a very interesting case of Ninja actually getting non-canon minifigures once more, and I say Ninja even though it's just Jay, but also remember that Kai did actually get his Source Tournament outfit as well, so they seem to be more in tune with actually giving us full collections, which is just nice to see. But it just doesn't take away from the fact that there are so many different Ninja minifigures we're still due, but they didn't actually give it to us because they are not canon to the show. This is very much a new age thing of us getting these non-canon Ninja. I just wish they would go back into the backlog. But I do think on an overall, the non-canonicity to the show's media and to the minifigures is a very interesting hypothetical what if, and I do like to see how different companies and how the show itself takes those liberties and gives us what the hypothetical could actually look like. I think it's really interesting to see, and I'm just glad that we do continue to get it in a more active way. But what do you think of the non-canon media I talked about today? Do you wish Shadow of Ronin was canon? Do you wish the Ninjago tournament was canon? Wu's Tease was canon? Or do you wish you actually got to see those J minifigures translated into the show itself? I would love to know what you guys think of it, because I do think it's quite interesting. And if you like this video, I will talk about more non-canon material, because I actually do like looking into these different topics. But that is about it for today, you guys. Thank you very much for watching, and take care. Okay, bye!